And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I'm joined again by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. So we are coming to you this week with a number of new stories. Give you a quick heads up that I am recovering from COVID, so hopefully I don't have any coughing fits or brain fogginess, but bear with me just in case. But the good news is that we still have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about this week. So if we take a look at what we have on the docket this week, we've got a number of new electric bicycles. Some came out from Yamaha, some from a company called Delfast. We've also got some crazy electric bike sales going on from a big company that you might have heard of called Rad Power Bikes, some of the best sales they've ever had in the history of the company, which is kind of wild. What else? We've got a pile of interesting electric bikes, micro cars, scooters, all sorts of weird micromobility things that we saw at Micromobility America. And then we've got some bigger vehicles to check out as well. A few upcoming electric motorcycles, like one from Super 73, the Sur Ron Storm Bee. And we took some test rides recently too on the LiveWire S2 Del Mar and on Polaris's Ranger XP Kinetic. It's their all-electric new Ranger side by side. So where are we going to start out this week, Seth?
All right, we're going to start with Yamaha launching two new full suspension electric bikes.
Okay, so these are the YDX Moro updated bikes. The frame you might recognize. It was actually introduced a couple of years ago, but it's a really cool frame. It's what they call a dual twin. It was patented by Yamaha, and both the top tube and the down tube are actually two tubes in parallel. And that means that on the down tube, they've got the battery actually sandwiched between two frame tubes. And then in the top tube, they've got the shock running up sort of in between those tubes as well. So you get a smaller, lighter frame that still packs in all of the important parts that you need for a full suspension electric mountain bike. So a really interesting and novel frame design there. The other big change, though, in these two updated bikes is that they get Yamaha's new motor, which I think is the PWX3, is the latest motor, though they have so many at this point that it's a bit hard to keep track of them. The former one used the PWX2. And like most new mid-drive electric bike motors these days, the differences are pretty much it's a little lighter, a little more powerful, a little torquier, just a little better everything. And so these are Yamaha's new sort of top of the line electric bikes. There's two models here, and basically they're differentiated by one of them having slightly better parts than the other. Slightly nicer brakes, slightly nicer drivetrain, that sort of thing. But they start at somewhere around $5,000 and then go up to about, I want to say, like 6,800 for the nicer one. So we're talking about a pretty pricey bike here, though. When it comes to high-end electric mountain bikes, that's, I guess, not all that pricey if you really think about it.
Yeah, it's not super pricey. I mean, it's, compared to like Frey or something like that, it's a little on the high end, but Yamaha's, I would say, definitely a little higher end. They do their own stuff. My big thing, obviously Yamaha makes some huge electric motorcycles. I was kind of surprised that the bike has a peak output of 500 watts. In the US, we go up to 750 typically. 500 watts, is that going to do it for us? I mean, 85 nanometer newton meters
Newton
of
meters,
torque
yeah.
is nice. It's like good, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like for a Yamaha bike that seems a little low.
Yeah, and it's funny too because normally these types of high-end electric mountain bikes will come with a 250 watt rating because these sell very well in Europe and they have to conform to those European 250 watt limits. But here in the U.S., Yamaha Power Assist Bicycles is an American company, um, and so it's interesting that it's kind of not here or not there, and that they don't go up to the 750 watt limit they're allowed in the U.S., but they also it to being higher than the 250 watts that they're limited to for European markets, which, as most people know by now, these electric mountain bikes, even the ones sold in Europe, they're not really 250 watts, even though most of them will say, Bosch 250 watt motor. Generally, they fall in that 500 watt range. So Seems like the PWX3 motor here from Yamaha, it's kind of par for the course in terms of European legal power, even if it's a little over the limit. But they're not pushing as hard as they could for the the American market with that 750 watts. I mean, for the type of people that ride these, they're mountain bikers that are used to adding a lot of their own power, so I'm sure that's
Right.
not going to bother them too much. But it is interesting that for a company that their design and headquarters is based in the US, they didn't actually push to go all the way with that 750-watt limit.
And does this have a throttle, or is this strictly pedal assist?
No, this is strictly pedal assist, so it's not going to be a class 2, and I think it goes up to 20 miles an hour too. I don't recall off the top of my head, so I'm not even sure if it's class 1 or class 3. It might just be a class 1 bike if it only goes up to 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, and that's not bad if you're off, if you're on trails, you really don't want to be going 28 miles per hour. But yeah, I mean, like people who are thinking about this bike, it's not going to go super fast on road. It doesn't have the high end power that you're going to get from the bikes that kind of skirt the legal limits a little bit, like a Luna or Frey or whatever. But for its purpose, and that's off-roading, and for people who pedal a lot, this is going to be a great bike.
And I imagine it'll stand up to the kind of abuse that this type of riding is designed for too, which is where a good amount of that price comes in designing the frame and going with components that can take 3-4 foot drops repeatedly.
Now, Yamaha, do they make motors for other bikes, or they strictly make their own motors?
Yeah, so that's one thing that's actually pretty interesting about Yamaha is that they're one of the few companies that build motors as an OEM for other companies and build their own electric bikes, and that's really rare. You don't see Bosch e-bikes out there in the same way you don't normally see like a Reese and Muller motor on another bike.
Right. That's interesting. All right, cool. Let's move on. E-bike company, very generic name, but they do interesting things. Releases over-the-air update boosting its electric bike speed over 50%.
So this is actually, I guess it should say an e-bike company because I left the article there in headline fashion. So this is a company called OK, OKAI, or maybe it's Okai. If someone knows how to pronounce that, let me know.
My bad on that.
No worries. This is the EV50, which was launched as the OK Ranger, but now they often market as the OK EB50. And it's interesting because this came out as a 20 mile per hour class 2 e-bike. And when it first came out, that was like one of the only digs I had against it was that, this looks like a very nice fat tire sort of adventure style electric bike, lots of power, big battery, but it only goes 20 miles an hour, kind of, a bit of a downer for these bikes that are normally ridden on wide open dirt roads, not something that you wouldn't be able to handle over 20 miles an hour on. But I guess they, heard the call of the community and they released an over-the-air update to their app that allowed riders to unlock the bike to 28 miles per hour. And so, in fact, it took it from what would ostensibly be a class 2 e-bike to a class 3 e-bike, with the exception of it actually allowed 28 miles per hour with throttle use as well. And so that's not even technically within the confines of a class 3 designation, because with class 3 it's supposed to cut out at 20 on throttle and then you can pedal assist up to 28. So this is technically not even a class 3 e-bike anymore. And even if it was, there are also people that have found they can get up to 31 miles an hour with this update. So it's just like,
opening it wide up. Yeah.
Yeah. They just don't care anymore. They're just, letting riders do whatever they can with as much power as that motor will give.
Well, you love
which
to
is
see it.
kind of neat. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you buy a bike, and everyone who bought this wasn't expecting this, they didn't say in the beginning, like, just wait, we're going to release an update, it'll go faster. Everyone bought this assuming, all right, it's a nice, powerful bike. It cuts out at 20, whatever. And then a few months later, they get, this nice gift in the mail when they wake up and get to see that their bike can suddenly do over 50% as much speed.
Yeah. And so that's Okai is kind of like, they used to be kind of strictly OEM for other outfits, like scooter companies, for instance. And I guess maybe that's where they get their over-the-air chops, where they're they can update things remotely.
Yeah, I can't imagine another company even doing that. Can you imagine just one day Rad being like, by the way, your bikes go 50% faster now?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if Van Moof did that, and I think they probably could do that, but they wouldn't do that. But no other bike company, I don't think, could just do that. Maybe what you call it? The Croatians.
Oh,
Um,
Delfast.
yeah, no,
Oh, not
Delfast are
oh, the
Ukrainian.
grape. Yeah, they're the
Yeah,
Ukrainians. I was
yeah,
getting my Eastern Europe confused.
yeah. Grape. I feel like
Grape, yeah.
grape would do something like that. Although theirs would be open to begin with anyway. But um, yeah, that's super cool. And yeah, it's interesting to see Okai kind of or okay coming out of the OEM world and you know hyping their own brand. We saw that a little bit. I forget what bike show they were kind of like, okay, we used to do this and now we're doing this. So that's cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And nice to see them pushing the limit too, even if it's kind of quasi questionably legal.
Oh, it's definitely illegal. There's no doubt about it. Speaking of Ukraine, Delfast unveils California-inspired 1,000-watt electric moped with 100-mile range. Delfast is usually big on the range.
Yeah, not even just California inspired, California named. This is the Delfast California. That's the name of the new electric moped. And this, in fact, carries a very much moped style frame. It's technically a class 3 e-bike, like we talked about before, but it adopts that step through moped style frame. It's got smaller wheels, 20 inches. They're mag wheels, which is nice because that means they don't have spokes. There's just these three giant spokes that are sort of cast as part of the rim. But really, I think the big takeaway here from this bike is the massive mid-drive motor. This is the Bafang M620, which many people know as the Bafang Ultra motor. It's 160 newton meters of torque. It's peaks at something like 1500 watts, though a lot of companies will dial it back a bit. I think Delfast is calling this 1000 watts, so they might have toned it down a little bit from its peak output. But any way you slice it, this is a very powerful motor, and they've got it limited at 28 miles per hour, to keep it legal as a class 3. But we've seen bikes with the same motor do 36, 37 miles an hour. So it's certainly capable of a lot more.
Yeah,
And this,
and
sorry, go ahead.
also I think we've seen some even tweak the motor to go over 2 kilowatts and even 3 kilowatts. I think Watt Wagon's got like a 3.5 kilowatt version that we haven't tested yet, so we can't confirm. But they're advertising it as a 3.5 kilowatt Bafang Ultra. So a
Yeah,
lot of things you can do with that motor.
and I think when Bafang designed that motor, they didn't really try and optimize for weight or anything. It's a big chunky motor, but that also means that it's got a lot of thermal mass there, and it allows you to pull more power out of it without instantly overheating it, which is a benefit for these companies that push it a little closer to the edge of the envelope there.
Yeah.
And so this bike, another really interesting thing is sort of the backstory here. So if you're familiar with Delfast, you probably know they're more like enduro trail looking bike. It's kind of like a boxy Sur Ron almost. That's their top 3.0. But this bike is very different looking. It's like a totally different vibe. And the reason for that is that one of their engineers was in California when the invasion of Ukraine started last, I want to say February or so. And he got stuck there for a few months. And while he was there, he was like, well, what am I going to do at this time? And he just started looking around and sort of adopted that California moped vibe and designed a bike around that. So he used that time to create this new design, and that turned into, along with about 30 people working with him back in Ukraine, to this new California moped. So it's kind of an interesting origin story for this bike as well.
That is interesting. And it's also interesting that like that was, in March or whatever of this year. So like all that all that happened, like the genesis of that happened what 6 months ago, and then they're already selling them.
Yeah, I
Or,
mean,
or
it's wild.
yeah, pretty quick. Interesting. Cool. We know when these are going to be in people's hands, or more specifically, your hands.
I want to say that they're coming out in early next year. They did start taking pre-orders,
Hmm.
or no, I'm sorry, they haven't started, but they are starting soon. They're going to launch an Indiegogo, but they did announce the price. So the MSRP is a little pricey. It's $4,000, but they're going to launch them at 2,000 on Indiegogo, and I think the fair price falls somewhere in between those, maybe
Hmm.
like in the high two to low three end. Four seems like an like artificially high number to give a nice discount to, but
Right.
yeah, I think early next year is when they're talking about actual production.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, $2,000. That's pretty good price for a Bafang Ultra. I wonder if they're gonna have any kind of like, don't cut this red wire or it'll make it really fast kind of
Yeah,
situations.
that,
Because
that does feel like what they do.
right. I mean, their other bikes go quite fast. So moving on. Oh, this caught me kind of off guard. I saw the news. They sent me an email and I was like, Micah, guess what? And then I looked and you already had posted. So um, Rad Power Bikes launches its best sale ever with electric bikes starting at $499. So that's an incredible price.
Yeah, this is wild. I don't think we've ever in the history of Rad Power Bikes as a company seen sales this good. And so the 499 bike is just the Rad Mission. To keep this in perspective, you're not going to get like a Rad Rover 6 Plus for 499, but they have some other bikes, including the Rad Rover 6 Plus, on crazy sale. So the Rad Rover 6 Plus is a $2,000 bike that they have at 1299 right now. And they also have their older Rad Cities, the Rad City 3 and 4, marked down to 1399, which isn't as good of a sale. Those are, I want to say, 1599 bikes. So those are only marked down $200. But those other two models are marked down $700, which is both awesome and kind of scary because it makes me wonder what's going on at Rad, that there's this like fire sale going on.
Yeah, it is weird because they marked it down to what, 899, I feel like a couple weeks
Yep.
ago. And
Yep.
like now I kind of feel a little bit I don't want to say anything inappropriate, but like, well, we just told people like this is a crazy goodbye at 899, and then a bunch of people probably bought at 899 and now it's 499 and they're probably like, "Oh, thanks a lot for that." So but 499, that kind of conjures up the original like Saunders Indiegogo price. And they're like, how are they doing this? This is crazy. Saunders had that fat tire bike originally with no suspension and basically nothing for 499. This is obviously not a fat tire bike. There's no gears on it. It's very simple and basic, and it's cool that it's 499. I don't know how long it's going to last. It sounds like maybe they have another version of this coming out at a higher price. Uh, I would imagine. What do you think? I mean, why are they doing this?
Yeah, I mean, my two best guesses would be either that we're going to see a Rad Mission 2 coming pretty soon and they're clearing out inventory, or they just like earlier this year when there was huge uncertainty about supply chain, that they ordered a whole pile of bikes and now they've got some crazy overstock situation where they're trying to clear out this massive quantity. I mean, those are my best two guesses, because anything else, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's such a good sale that if it wasn't on Rad's own site, I would think it was like
Yeah,
some scam or something.
yeah,
Like the
same.
bikes would show up saying like Road Power Bikes or something.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I mean, like, I don't know how to like. I don't want to punch a gift horse in the mouth or whatever they say, but like, it's such a good sale that it kind of disrupts the whole like ecosystem. Um, like, well, for instance, like if I didn't have 10 e-bikes in my garage right now, I would like snap one of these up or two of these up. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I
I j-
have a Rad Mission and I'm like, should I get another one? It's
I
so
know,
cheap.
I know. It's just like when the prices are that low, you're like, just buy it. Like, think of, we'll figure it out later what we should do with this thing. Uh, no, and I've never actually ridden a Rad Mission. I've seen them in person. They look like solid bikes. But I imagine that Rad is coming out with something. So I think there's two things that this tells us about Rad's next bike, and they're probably going to continue to sell these inexpensively. But I think Rad is going to have a new bike that kind of fits this profile. It's probably going to be priced less than the original Mission, which was, I think, started at 1100 or 1000 or something.
Yeah, they started at 1,000 and then they raised it eventually to 1,200.
Right. So I think the new bike's going to come in probably at 1000 or something. Um, because why would you sell the older version for so much less, unless the new bike was going to cost less than the old bike. The other thing is it's probably going to have like significant feature upgrades. So I would imagine some gears, like that's one of the things that the Rad Mission always kind of seemed like it should have, and maybe some better battery integration. Uh, the Rad Mission always seemed kind of like I don't want to like not like an Anchier bike, but it seemed like let's just buy
Kind of
a cheap,
stuck together.
yeah, just buy a cheap frame and throw a battery on it. Um, so I think those are, if I had to guess, those would be like some of the upgrades that we'd see. The Rad Mission already has lighting, right? I can
Yep.
kind of see lighting, so maybe we'll see something upgraded there as well. I do already love the tire size, and the form factor is great, obviously. So what do you think? Something like that?
Yeah. I mean, and it's been a while too. The original Rad Mission came out in the summer of 2020, I believe. So it's coming on 2.5 years now. This winter, and so I could certainly see that there would be a Rad Mission 2 in the works at this point. And I think your guesses there are pretty spot on. And I think as their entry level bike, it's probably been important to them to keep a sub $1,000 bike, and
Hmm.
if they can do it with a new model, then I think that's going to help them retain a big part of that lower market share that they started to scoop up when they introduced this.
Yeah, and there's companies like Electrek out there that have introduced lower priced e-bikes at $799, and I know Juiced has also lowered its prices a little bit after the supply chain issues are kind of loosening up, I think. So getting those prices down is noteworthy, and obviously 499. Everybody's talking about that, so that's good publicity.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild. Like if it wasn't their own market, I'd call it like e-bike dumping.
Yeah, it's crazy. It seems strange because Rad has always tried to keep its prices high. We talked to Mike Redenbach, the CEO, a bit, and we're always like, "Hey, could you get the Rad Runner down a little bit?" And he's like, "Yeah, we have some margin, but we want to keep the prices kind of stable. The stability of the price market was important, and here this is just like grenading that whole stability. So interesting move here. If you're looking for a low end e-bike, this is absolutely way better than picking up a Amazon e-bike or a Walmart e-bike. This is going to be way better than that. 499 is a steal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Seth. I mean, if you're looking for your first e-bike, this is just the value here is crazy.
All right, let's move on from that. The coolest e-bikes, scooters, and electric microcars and more we saw at Micromobility America.
Yeah, we're gonna have to grab just a few of these here because I think I included like 20 from the Micromobility America conference that I attended last month in San Francisco. There were a lot of interesting things on display, just like from everything. I mean, you had your normal scooters and e-bikes, but then you had like cargo electric scooters, you had powered roller skates, you had micro electric cars. I mean, there was everything. And so, if you see anything that like captures your eye, Seth. Seems like that cargo scooter has caught it.
Yep, that's our first supportive call here.
Yeah, so this is not available for purchase yet. It's still patent pending, but this is called the Air Glide from Artful Design Group. And basically, it's a seated scooter, so there's no pedals, and it's got a big front loading bucket on it. So it's like a front loading cargo bike without pedals, but then it folds up and the rear sort of collapses into the cargo bucket. And these little, like, sort of, I call them like training wheels, drop down. It turns into a cart, so you can push it into like Costco, do your shopping, like put it all into your cargo scooter's bucket while pushing it along, and then like push it right back out, disassemble it, or I guess assemble it back into a scooter and ride it home.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't think I've ever seen a bike cart carry the back of the bike. Like,
There's a lot of innovative stuff going on here.
well, it's just such an interesting form factor here. But it it is just amusing to see the bike carrying the back of the bike.
Yeah, and
in this
they had to
instance.
solve interesting problems because of that too, because the motor is actually in the rear along with the battery, and
Uh-huh.
so but it completely disconnects, so there can't be like a wired connection for the throttle there. So the
Oh yeah.
throttle is actually wirelessly connected, kind of like on an electric skateboard.
Did you get it? I mean, did you have an opportunity to ride it?
Oh
Was it
yeah, yeah, I was riding that thing.
how did it feel?
It felt long, but
Yeah,
surprisingly easy to control. Like I really thought it would be a little more like wobbly, like I was, like riding a snake down the road, but
right.
it actually, rode nicely. It's got
Pretty firm.
16-inch wheels, so it's, feels like a kind of like a small bike wheel.
That's so interesting. And the throttle was pretty responsive with the wireless and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was just immediate. Like I wouldn't have known that it wasn't a normal wired throttle if they hadn't have showed it to me.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, we'll look for those hitting the market at some point.
Yeah,
What?
it'll be a little while, but
Yeah.
yeah. So these are the Aventura X. It's a Barcelona-based company that's now operating in the U.S. And they've got these sort of Vespa-styled, retro-looking seated electric scooters. I'm sure these are from China and they've rebadged them, but they're still super fun. I rode one, nice and smooth. It's funny because it has a like hidden power mode that if you like twist the throttle 5 times while pushing certain buttons, it goes into power mode. But I
Nice.
didn't like that at all because it was too like jumpy. It was like really just like wanted to like fly off the line.
Okay.
So they put it back in like eco mode, and man, the thing just it's like smooth. It's comfortable. It only goes I want to say 30 miles an hour, so it's like moped law speeds, but
Uh-huh.
nice and elegant looking. So it was a pretty nice one to see there.
Yeah, that's like perfect for like the beach house or heading just around like town. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I also I like that these off brands are designing really good looking scooters, and that'll kind of hopefully kind of push Vespa into creating uh, affordable versions of their. They have a very limited electric line. Are they owned by Piaggio or something? Like what?
Yeah, so they're I think Vespa is still a Piaggio brand if I'm not mistaken. If I
Yeah,
am, I'm sure someone's going to call me out.
right. Yeah, and they have like one electric scooter, and it's like $35,000 or something insane. Uh, so
Yeah, I
it
think it's like 8, but still it's, for what it is, it's way too expensive.
right. So hopefully this kind of gets them taking it more seriously. All right, what else
Yeah.
should we talk about here? The Eli electric microcar. Oh, that's
Yeah,
this
so
right here.
that's that guy right there. Yeah, so that's basically a in the US they're limited to 25 miles an hour, so you're talking like neighborhood electric vehicle. Um, and it's like a two-seater. I mean, it feels like a little car when you get in. It's pretty trippy.
Hmm.
The doors, it's glass all the way down, and so it feels bigger than it is when you get in because you can actually look down and like see through the door instead of feeling like you're in a tiny capsule.
Hmm.
But otherwise, it just drives like a normal car. It's pretty cool.
And the front wheel is just a single wheel, right?
No, it's got two
No,
wheels. It's a four-wheeler.
really. That it's weird because the perspective on the video actually looks like the back wheel is a single wheel, and then
Yeah,
on this one the front wheel looks like a single wheel.
the whole thing is just weird when you like walk around it. Everything, doesn't quite follow what you'd expect from, your whole life of looking at cars.
What about Boaz bikes? I'm more interested in this seated scooter.
Yeah, so Boaz bikes is kind of a misnomer because they are scooters, as you described. There's no pedals on these,
Hmm.
but they're a really cool scooter design. And the company, they're all about safety. Like when we were talking, they kept coming back to how like their prime goal from the beginning has been to make like a safe and comfortable scooter for people that feel like they're going to fall off a bird scooter. And so that's what these are. They're seated, but they're also nice and low. So you can put your feet on the ground at any time, and you feel like you're sitting in a chair. They've got rear suspension there. There's no front suspension, but you're basically sitting right over the rear wheel. So the rear suspension is going to be the one that you're really feeling there. And then they've got disc brakes, lighting, mirrors. So they're really like harping on this safety equipment, comfortable feeling, like kind of impossible to fall over because you just put your feet down, that kind of thing. So it's a really cool design. They mostly do rentals. They're in a few cities, and they're kind of like a a rent by the minute Lime competitor, but they
Hmm.
do sell the scooters as well. So if people, really like the design and they want to own one, they'll sell you one.
Yeah, it's cool. A couple things I note, like the big front wheels, great for not, getting over potholes if you have like a bad road situation near you. Having a bigger front wheel is nice. Also, it looks like you could, but like you could also do a standing thing on these if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, I imagine you could. It's got a lot of space there, but when they give you a seat, like why stand when you can sit?
Yeah, that's what I never understood. The standing scooters could, most of them can convert to sitting so easily, and when you're sitting, you actually have a little bit more control over the, with your kind of legs, you can kind of control the bike or the scooter a little bit more. So I'm surprised there's not more sitting scooters out there. All right,
Yeah.
moving on. This one I'm sure my son would love to see is looks like an electric. Um, what do you call those things?
Well, I don't know if they're roller skates or roller blades because they
Yeah,
got like wide wheels like skates, but they're inline like blades.
right.
So, I mean, like I guess they probably handle closer to roller blades. So I'd call them electric roller blades. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's the technology is basically electric skateboard technology. With like the remote control and everything, but
Hmm.
stuffed into a skate form factor. So both of the two boots, skates, whatever you call those things, the end of
Hmm.
your leg piece, both of
Right.
them have rear wheel drive. And it was funny because I saw a few people testing them out, and they really look like timid in the beginning because I imagine the feeling is if you give too much throttle, your legs just shoot out from under you.
Right.
So I don't know what the sensation is like. This is one of the few I didn't actually try, but in terms of convenience, I can't think of like a smaller form factor electric vehicle
Right.
that you can still like commute around a city with. And the cool thing is these also strap onto your shoes. So it's not like you have to be like, oh, where am I going to put my shoes while I'm, riding them? They just like those old fashioned 1950s skate shoes. They just strap right onto your tennis shoes.
Yeah, and Razer made a version of these that were more like Heelys. That
Yeah,
my
like a platform kind of that you sit
yeah,
on.
that my son tried out, and he actually got pretty good at it. I wonder if these will ever become like a mode of transportation.
Well, we'll have to sign your son up for the review when they eventually come
Yeah,
out.
yeah, for sure. All right, what else we got here? Driverless delivery. So these are looks like droney type things.
Yeah, so they're built using the Archimoto FUV platform,
Hmm.
but then the entire inside has been scooped out for a big cargo bay. So it's like a totally driverless platform where the two seats are now a big trunk, and that thing will just, I guess, companies that need delivery will just have a fleet of these instead of paying drivers a fair wage. They'll just pay a robot, I guess.
Hmm. And they're not legal on roads yet or anything, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think a lot of cities, it's like the driverless stuff is running ahead of regulations, anyways. So
Right.
they're not illegal, but no one said they're legal.
Right. I guess maybe on campuses they can kind of try these out and hopefully not kill anybody. All right, now we're on skateboards.
Yeah. So this is it takes a lot to like really impress me with an electric skateboard because they're kind of simplistic vehicles, but the suspension here is wild. It's got like dual wishbone suspension that you'd see in basically like a go-kart scaled down into skateboard sized. And then it also has a removable battery, which by itself is like just kind of interesting. But the tool for removing the battery is actually built into the bottom of the wireless remote that you use as the throttle.
Hmm.
So that was another kind of neat thing here that you need the remote to be able to remove the battery, which is kind of a fun design thing. So between the suspension and that, these are some pretty innovative electric skateboards.
Yeah, and I noticed the wheels are like a rubber, like a tire rather than most skateboards have like skateboardy type wheels. Um,
Right.
and is that the suspension on front and back? I can't tell if the back has suspension as well.
Yeah, it's got a similar suspension, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but these are Hunter boards for someone who wants to look this up. It's a Portuguese company.
Okay, and they're available for sale, and
I believe so. Yeah, they were there, representing their product line. So I'm pretty sure these are already available.
All right, moving on to Jackrabbit. We've seen this before, but
Yeah, Jackrabbit. Oh, it's always going to be this little spot in my heart, very small spot for this very small micro bike, which is technically, again, kind of a scooter because it doesn't have pedals. But for those that don't know, the Jackrabbit, it rolls on 20-inch wheels that are so close that it feels like they're almost touching. That's how short the wheelbase is. And it's just like a super small 24-pound bicycle like micromobility device. So a really cool thing if you just need like a very small scooter sized vehicle, but with big enough wheels that you aren't going to fall into a pothole.
that's cool. I'm looking for. I know there's a lot of stuff here. I don't want to spend
Yeah.
anything else. I should be focusing on.
This last one, wheel, is a good one to end on.
Okay.
It's WEEL. This is a believe it or not, it's a driverless bike. You see how thick that head tube is there?
Yeah, I
There's a
do not
motor in
believe
there.
it because
So if you want to see it in action, it's in the video that I embedded in the post. I think if you scroll down a little further and then jump to like the very end there, I
okay.
included a video of it working. But basically, the head tube has a motor that controls steering, and then it can basically balance itself. So
Oh
yeah,
wow.
let it start from maybe like 10 seconds from there, and it'll start playing its video, and it's not really meant for to be a driverless bike. What it's really meant for is helping people feel more confident. Like if you take your hands off, it's not going to crash. It's also designed with a camera, so it can keep you in a bike lane, and if you start to wander out, it's almost like lane assist kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so it's designed to make people feel more confident and to be safer. It's not meant to drive without a rider, but it theoretically can.
That is pretty weird. It would be cool. I mean, if you could park it, at a bike parking thing, and then, with your little phone, just be like, "Hey, bike, hey, Steed, come, come pick me up." I feel like
Yeah,
do a video like that, and it would be pretty popular. All right, that's wow, quite a bunch of stuff there. I'm gonna have to sneak in next year to that conference. That seems like a pretty cool one. All right, moving on. Super 73's Neo retro electric motorcycle shown in first actual testing video. So we've seen this bike before, but it's now in a video.
yeah. Now it's real. Like we kind of figured, oh, this is a concept when it first came out, but they actually are showing off the concept working for the first time. They said it's dialed back to like 25% power or 25% speed, but this is the first time we've ever seen this motorcycle actually working and not just sitting pretty on a stage. So this is kind of a big moment for Super 73 that their C1X is progressing towards production. So that's a pretty cool thing to see. We still don't have a lot of specs on it. We still don't know how much it's going to cost. And we really don't know when it's going to be out either. But we do know that they're actually making progress, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a good looking bike. And we do not know when those are going to come out. We know that the kind of the competition is Saunders Metacycle, maybe some of those other low priced bikes. And this still has like some of the Super 73, like the handlebars kind of remind me of a bike more than a motorcycle, for instance. And the seat also reminiscent of Super 73 design.
Yeah, even like the color, the bright pink and yellow, very kind of 80s there. So
Hmm.
they definitely stuck with their styling, which is great to see because that's a big part of what people buy into when they get a Super 73. These days, there's so many Super 73 knockoffs that, they really want part of that community, part of that style to get the actual Super 73 feeling. And so it's cool to see they captured that with the motorcycle as well.
And it looks like they're kind of advertising a unlocking with a card kind of situation there, maybe with the phone as well.
Yeah, it's starting to become a little more common. I've even seen a few e-bikes and scooters that have those like NFC cards, and
Yeah,
it's a cool way to protect the bike and make sure that if someone's going to steal it, you're not making it easy.
right. Yeah, you got to put it on the back of a pickup. All right, we're closing down as we usually do with some higher powered stuff. We got the Sur Ron Storm Bee 68 mile per hour off road electric motorcycle gets U.S. arrival date, takes pre orders.
We've been watching this one since before Corona, even when they first announced there was going to be a more powerful Sur Ron. This is about 2 to 3 times more powerful than the Sur Ron Light BX, which is the one that most people think of when they hear of a Sur Ron. And so we've been waiting a long time to find out when these are going to actually come to the US. And so now we know the US importer, which is a company called Dion, I want to say Dian, I believe. And they have announced that it'll be coming in February of next year. So they're already taking pre-orders. It's going to be $8,500, but riders can put down a $500 reservation to get in line now. And basically, this is like a sort of fully fledged dirt bike, whereas the original Sur Ron is more of like a light sort of trail bike, like 5 kilowatts or so. This one has 22.5 kilowatts, and it's got a liquid cooled motor. It's a much larger bike. It can go 68 miles an hour. So this is significantly more of a serious bike than the Sur Ron was, the
Yeah,
original Sur Ron.
different class of bike altogether, really. So you mentioned the importer. Does that mean that Luna and Segway aren't going to be part of that, or does that mean that they have an additional middle person?
Yeah, so I actually asked the importer about that because I was under the impression that Luna had an exclusive Sur Ron deal for the US. And they were like, no, we haven't heard of any exclusive deal. So they import both the Sur Ron Light Bee and this upcoming Storm Bee, the more powerful bike.
Oh,
And they've got their own dealer network that's not connected to Luna. So, and as
but
far as I know, I don't think Luna's even bringing in this larger bike, the Storm Bee.
yeah, I think I saw on Facebook that Eric, the CEO of Luna, had talked about it, but I think their vibe is more bikes, electric bikes, and Suron's kind of like the top end of, or sorry, the Light B was kind of the top end of that, and this is kind of moving into a different category. So maybe that's why they, decided not to go with this. But I'm also surprised Segway. I guess Segway is also into more bike and scootery things. So I'm also, I guess, a little surprised that Segway is not part of the importing of this guy.
Yeah, I mean, even when they, bought Sur Ron and then started producing, rebadged Sur Rons, that surprised me because Segway's always been the like, you don't need any training, just hop on our thing and ride it down
Right.
the street. And
Right.
these are not that.
No, not that at all. Well, they're exciting. I'm glad you're in contact with the new importer, and look forward to seeing a review of this. I'm sure you're looking forward to it as well, right?
Yeah, though they're actually already available in Tel Aviv. I've been meaning to go to the Israeli dealer here and check them out. The US is kind of getting them later than everyone else, unfortunately.
Oh, interesting. Well, giddy up on that. Let's get that out.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Testing Harley's LiveWire S2 Del Mar electric motorcycle. First you ride it, then you want to buy it.
This has been one of the highlights of my tests over the last few months. I was quite honored that they invited me out to test it. They said I'm the second journalist to ever get on it, but I've never seen anyone else cover this. So I don't know who the first one was or why they haven't shared the experience, but this thing was incredible. This is the second electric motorcycle that LiveWire's ever produced. And technically, it's their first in-house model after the LiveWire one was kind of inherited from Harley Davidson. So this is a bit of a smaller bike, though it's still not as small as I was expecting. It's still a full-size motorcycle, and they haven't released the power specs or the top speed. But man, this thing is like basically just as powerful feeling as the LiveWire one. It's almost as quick off the line. It'll do 0 to 60 miles an hour in 3.1 seconds, whereas the LiveWire one, I believe, is 3 seconds flat. So that's basically, the same thing in my book.
Yeah, I mean at that point you're just trying to keep the front end down, right?
Yeah, I mean, these have, computer control, so they handle that for you. All the, anti-wheelie, anti-stoppy, um, everything, it just makes it easy to ride it well. But man, this thing it was a blast to ride. It is so powerful, especially going in expecting it to kind of be like a toned down LiveWire one. Really, it's just like a more affordable LiveWire one in that sense. and it's also much more comfortable. If
Interesting.
you've ever been on a LiveWire one, you'll know that the reach is really far. The how far you have to lean forward to grab the bars, you really feel like you're kind of leaning out over the tank. Whereas on the S2 Del Mar, you're a lot more upright, and to me, it's a much more comfortable feeling. It's not a cruiser bike by any means, but it's closer to that end of the spectrum than to like a sport bike feeling. And so it's like sort of an upright roadster bike. To me, it was just so much more comfortable than a LiveWire one. Even though each time I get on a LiveWire one, I get used to that long reach. But I think with this one, because the battery isn't quite as long, you're not forced to really lean out over it to find those bars. And so it was just as sporty, but to me so much more comfortable to ride. And really fast to hear. I blurred out the speedometer because I was going well in excess of the speed limit on New York highways. And so I don't even
Jeez.
know what the top speed is because I got up as high as I felt like I wanted to risk losing my license with, and it still could have gone faster. So we don't know what the top speed is yet. They haven't announced it, just like they haven't announced the actual motor power. But we know that it is pretty darn fast, faster than you could legally ride anywhere in the US.
Yeah, that's great. So where did you go actually?
So we went around New York City out onto. They told me a bunch of roads and bridges with names of famous people that I don't know enough about New York City to remember. But I think at one point we were in New Jersey.
Okay.
There was like really pretty highway roads with trees on either side, which makes me think we were out of New York City at that point.
Yeah, probably. And if
And
you were in New Jersey, you probably went over the George Washington Bridge.
that sounds familiar. I feel like
Okay.
he was involved.
Okay.
Yeah,
So maybe like the Jersey what is it called? The Palisades Parkway or something.
yeah. I think we were on the. That sounds familiar.
All right. That's
Can,
cool.
can you tell I don't go to New York a lot?
A little bit, yeah. So I noticed differences between the Del Mar, like what kind of technology does it have? I noticed the charging is on the side instead of the top. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So it doesn't have the level 3 charging of the LiveWire 1, which
Mm,
is a bummer because on motorcycles, I mean, that's like key to be able to just like pull off, take a pee break or a coffee break, get like, three-quarters of your tank in and continue on your way. So it doesn't have that level 3 charging like the LiveWire 1, but it does have level 2, which the LiveWire 1 was missing. And
mm,
so because this is like largely a commuter bike, it's meant for people that are going to be riding around town and maybe need to get on the highway, but aren't going to be doing like long touring rides. Which, by the way, it has a range, a city range they listed of 110 miles. So because it's not really meant for touring, I think that's why they didn't feel the need to give it that level 3 charging. But the nice thing is that with level 2, they say it'll charge from 20 to 80% in 75 minutes. So it's if you take it somewhere, you do your shopping, you can come out with a full battery, but
yeah,
for quick stops, it's not going to do it. It's built on a totally different platform, though. It
right.
doesn't use that original motor, doesn't use that original LiveWire one battery. It's all new. It's all built on what's called the Aero platform. So it actually uses the battery as a structural member, and everything's bolted onto that structural battery. And
That,
so the goal is that they can then use that platform to build increasingly more affordable bikes and other styles of bikes.
that's interesting. That's kind of like Tesla's mantra lately is the structural battery pack. Um, Yeah, so I am a little bit surprised about the no level 3 charging because it seemed like that would be easier. Level 2 charging means you have to have a bigger inverter, but I imagine the size and weight of those things are coming down. Um, Anything else like like you said, it rides pretty similar in strength wise to the LiveWire one. What other like riding dynamics did you guys kind of feel or figure out?
For sure. I mean, it basically felt, like I said, as sporty as the Livewire one I've been on. It was super comfortable as a city bike, something that I feel like I could ride for hours and hours. Whereas the Livewire one, I was often having to stand up on the pegs, stretch my legs, that kind of thing. This one, it just I felt like I could ride it for a lot longer. We only did, maybe 2 hours, including stops and stuff, but I feel like I could have gone all day on it.
Yeah.
And also, it was such a conversation piece. Like every time we'd stop, like bus drivers rolled down their windows and were talking to us. The LiveWire one also is just very striking looking. So both of these bikes, they look different, and people like they want to know what they are. It's like they can't place it; they just know it looks good, and they
Right.
want to come up and talk to you about it. Which is something I talked about in the video as well. Was kind of neat. Is that like we'd be at a red light and people could come up and talk to you, and you're not like shouting over a motor,
Right.
or like we'd be riding down the road next to each other having a conversation between two bikes without having to yell over two engines.
Right. So it's pretty quiet. There's not like a lot of wind or any kind of noise like that.
Exactly. Yeah. If anything, it's so much quieter than the LiveWire one.
Interesting.
And I would even say it's like a little too quiet, not from a safety standpoint, because I don't buy that loud pipe save lives thing,
Right.
but just from a like sometimes you kind of want almost like a little bit of feedback from the bike that you hear the motor winding up and you kind of communicate back and forth that way with the bike. And so with this, it's so quiet that it doesn't quite have that same um, you know, sort of, I guess, feedback that you get from LiveWire One, where you both feel and hear the miter gear as it spools up. So it could be because I was riding in the city; it was very loud, but I could hear the LiveWire ones that were on either side of me from the two LiveWire guys, but I couldn't even hear my own bike.
That's crazy. All right, and the downer part though, what is the price?
Yeah, so the price they just announced it will be 16,999, basically $17,000
That's not
for
horrible.
this. It's not bad, but they had said a few months ago when they launched the bike that they were targeting a $15,000 price, and so in those 2 months, or I guess 3 or 4 months by now, I guess between supply chain issues, inflation, things pushed the price up higher than they were able to keep it at the 15. So it's a little bit of a bummer, but it's kind of par for the course. 17,000 that puts it between a $13,000 entry level zero and like a $23,000 Energica or like a $21,000 high end zero. So it kind of falls right in between those bikes.
Yep. All right. Keep an eye on those when they start hitting the street. And then last story, first ride, I went off-roading in the all-electric Polaris RANGER XP Kinetic.
Man, this was fun. I'm not normally a four wheel guy, and if I am, I guess it's when I'm not on roads. And this thing was just wild. So this is the Polaris Ranger XP Kinetic. It's a long name, and it is the new all electric Ranger. They have another electric Ranger, which is like prehistoric technology. It's like I think what the T Rexes drove around in.
Right. Lead acid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's real old, and so this replaces it, and it's so much better. It's actually built with a partnership with Zero Motorcycles, so it's got Zero's most powerful motor in there, puts out 110 horsepower, and then it's got either one or two of Zero's largest batteries, depending which trim level you get. So that equates to either 40 or 80 miles, and the thing is just so powerful. Oh my gosh, like just going around turns with all four wheels spinning and just throwing dirt in every direction. It was it was wild. Like, and I'm used to motorcycles too, so being able to like go around turns with like the pedal to the floor and not worry about falling over was just like one of the coolest parts of this. But in terms of like actual utility, because that's what Rangers are really meant for. I mean, yeah, they're fun to ride around like go karts, but they're meant to be work vehicles.
Right.
I mean, there's so many advantages here for people that take these things hunting. They're very quiet. You can get out in the outdoors. Or even if you're just like an outdoors person and a photographer, you're not going to scare the animals when you come up with these things. In terms of using it around a ranch or something, not only is it more powerful than any of the gas powered Rangers, or actually more powerful than any other utility side by side from any other company. But it's also so much more precise when you're driving it, because these electric motors, like you can just turn them like a fraction of a degree. And so if you want to just like back up into a tow hitch on a trailer, it's very easy to just like creep right up to it. Whereas with gas engines, you're spooling up the engine and then it's like, oh, I overshot it. And then you got to go forwards again. And so it's just a lot more precise, a lot more controllable. But at the same time, it's got basically every.
Oop, I think we might have lost Micah. Maybe he's putting down that dog in the background. Hopefully he pops back in here in a minute. But we're still watching the Polaris here. And I believe he went to Minnesota to try these out. So that's pretty cool. See what else we can look at here. Um, so you mentioned that they're powered by Zero's high-end motors and one or two of their batteries. That's pretty interesting. And the thing is, it's interesting. They were going off-roading in this, and they had helmets on and stuff. But Polaris are typically made for work vehicles. They did buy Gem. It doesn't sound like any part of the Gem though, which is a kind of a slow like city vehicle. We have Gems in like Grand Central Station. You see them in airports and stuff. Doesn't sound like any part of Gem is in this Polaris. That Gems also typically have like lead acid batteries and are pretty slow. So it's interesting to see Polaris go off on kind of a different tangent here. All right. So that's pretty much the end of the uh, stories we have today. There are some comments that I'd like to get into real quick here. So I will do that now. We have Tyler Donahoe. So many slopes on mountain bike trails. I feel like you just need the power to get up the hills. Gravity will help you down the hills just fine, plus your own pedal power. That's really true. I think the going downhill is where it's at. But hey, Micah, I kind of just finished up the Polaris there, and we're into the comments area. Sorry about the power outage. It sounded like maybe that dog bit a power line or something, and
I'm sure that's what happened.
yeah. So we're sad to see that the dog had to die, but we're okay. We're okay with the situation at this point. So I was just talking about mountain biking going downhills versus uphill, and having the power to go up a hill is kind of nice. We at not Interbike, yeah, Interbike in Reno. We got to try a ton of electric bikes, and I think probably the coolest part about it is the very powerful and high torque mountain bikes were almost as fun going up the hill as they were coming down the hill. And those were often they were just pedal assist, but with such a strong upward force that you could go uphill, obviously pedaling quite a bit, but you could go uphill not as fast, but almost as excitingly as going downhill. So we're looking forward to that Yamaha thing there. All right. So another question for you: how serious is it really that Okai changes Class 2 to 3, or just illegal in general, if police barely care to enforce in the first place? Yeah. So I'll jump in on that. I ride illegal bikes all the time because they look like legal bikes, and the cops really have no idea what legal or illegal is around here. But I think in places like Israel, maybe you can comment on that. They are a little bit more alert to legal and illegal bikes. What do you think?
Yeah, so like where I live in Tel Aviv, I mean, there are literally tens of thousands of e-bikes going around, and they're just a normal, generally accepted form of transportation. And so when it's that common, the police obviously are much more aware of the laws, and they will occasionally do roundups of all these overpowered e-bikes. And so, if you live in an area like it sounds like Dallas, Texas, the police don't really either know or care what the e-bike laws are. It's as long as, in my opinion, as long as you're basically observing the spirit of the law, you're not going too fast in bike lanes, you're not endangering anybody else on the road, then it's all, in my opinion, fairly, fine and good. I think that a lot of these laws are arbitrary anyways. We've got 10,000-pound electric Hummers that can mow down city blocks, and yet electric bikes are limited to 15 miles an hour in many countries. Like the I could go on and on about my own personal feelings about these laws, but generally speaking, I think as long as you're being safe and respectful of those around you, that to me is what's most important.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if the U.S. said, "All right, since we only have 65 mile per hour speeds, we're gonna we're going to govern every every car to 65 miles per hour, I think we'd probably overthrow the government at that point. Just knowing how we don't care about that stuff for cars. So like, why do we care so much about bikes? And I get, like bike trails, for regular bikes, it's a different thing. But like on a street, like if you're riding like a car and there's no bike lane, I feel like they should just let you open it up. And that's frankly what I do quite a bit because, when I'm on a 30 or 35 mile per hour street, I would rather ride with traffic than have traffic have to go around me. And I feel like that's safer. So that's how I roll. All right. Tyler Donahoe's again. I wonder if Delfast is still making equipment for the Ukrainian forces. We did have some stories about that previously. I'd love to get a military spec e-bike that actually is a piece of history beyond leisure activities. Maybe when the war's over, they'll have the how do I say that? Commemorative edition? No. Well, whatever. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean the bikes that they provided the Ukrainian forces with, I believe, were basically still top 3.0s. I'm not sure how different they were. So you can basically buy the bike that they outfit their troops with, though if you wait, maybe you can get like a military surplus one afterwards that's a true piece of history.
Yeah. Yeah, I know they're being used in the field. Transiers, so we're talking about the Rad at this point. I wonder what the margin is on a 499 e-bike. I would say it's probably razor thin.
Yeah, I'm guessing those are probably like, I don't know, $350 FOB bikes, and so they're by the time they're actually bringing them to the US, add in marketing, shipping, they might not be making anything.
Right. Hopefully breaking even. All right, these types of sales from Rad got a bunch of my friends into e-bikes. 499 will just get people in. Everyone I've ever let ride my e-bike for more than 30 minutes bought an e-bike in a month. That's also been my experience, and more importantly, my kids' experience. So, a lot of people are like, "Hey, kids can just ride bikes. They have plenty of energy and strength," and that's true. And we do have mountain bikes for our kids. But when they're riding on the street and they want to go a little faster, and we have a huge hill here, the e-bikes help. And my son has like 10 friends who all want e-bikes now. So I've either, depending on how you look at it, I've either ruined it for them or biking for them, or I've opened them up to a whole new world. And then electric. So Tyler Donahoe's back saying electric rollerblades seem like they would hurt your knees with all that weight at the end of your legs. What do you think about that?
Um, I guess if you were like bouncing around in them, maybe. I don't know. I think anyone who picks up rollerblading probably has sore knees for the first week, anyways. So I imagine it's something you get used to.
Yeah. All right. Brett Lagrange was excited about the Del Mar. Hopefully he got what he was looking for. Bubble Magic, small sitting scooters are very fun, but dang, they are hard on your knees. Wow. A lot of people with bad knees out there, including me, especially if you're an adult size. Being in that cramped position and trying to absorb bumps with your legs gets painful. I guess you really don't with that particular scooter because it had some good suspension and you kind of just you take it on the butt, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that one had dual rear suspension, so I think, that one's probably the one for you if you have knee issues.
All right. I'm sure the Super 73 C1X is capable, but man, it looks like a child's toy or first motorcycle for a teenager. Well, that might be more true than not. What do you think?
Well, so it is small. I don't know if you're talking about the design with like sort of like the pink and yellow, or if it's the size. I think they're 15-inch wheels, which is like, Honda Grom sized, I think. So very small for a motorcycle, but also, yeah, I mean, I think when it first came out, I described it as looking like an Atari. So it's kind of almost toy-like, and it has that retro theme. But hey, motorcycles, it's a very personal kind of thing. People buy what they think looks good, and then there's a lot of personalization in the motorcycle industry as well. So who am I to tell somebody if their bike looks good or not?
Yeah. All right. Tyler's going to lead us out here. I can't wait for the electric motorcycle market to expand. These motorcycles are getting awesome. I agree but they're almost already awesome. So uh, get in there. 17,000 doesn't sound nearly that bad for a very nice bike, and I think we can all agree that the LiveWire Del Mar is a very nice bike. It's getting closer and closer to affordability, and I guess that depends on your definition of affordability. And then he moves on to the ranchers. So we're now talking about Polaris. A few ranchers here in Texas would use the Polaris. What do you think about? So we didn't finish up with you on the Polaris since you are out, but what do you think about the Polaris for the working set? Like I guess ranching, but also just people with big yards that want to move rocks and logs around.
Yeah, so I can see this thing taking off. I mean, especially people who use it legit for commercial activities, farmers, ranchers, that sort of thing. I mean, it's a tool for them, and so it's not cheap, but I mean, a nicely equipped gas-powered Polaris Ranger is already going to be $18,000. So to spend $25,000, it's a bit more, but I think it's going to be even more useful for a lot of those commercial applications, and I think it's going to take off. If anything, I believe that they're going to be supply limited for a long time with all the demand they're seeing. I mean, when they first opened orders, they sold out in like a few hours. So there's a lot of demand out there.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it. You can take us out.
Awesome. So I think I speak for myself, Seth, and Tyler probably too. And I say thank you for joining us here on another episode of the Wheelie Podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks with all of the latest and greatest e-bike news. We'll see you guys then.